Did you ever wonder how we as humans gravitated to putting words on something that can be distributed? I mean, our forefathers were pretty good about putting ink on cave walls in the form of pictographs or images. But how would they ever get that information about what was going on to other tribes or within their own tribe? Once languages were created, they might be able to draw on the wall, but no one will ever see it. It is interesting that the spoken word evolved into the pictograph, the hieroglyphic, and then the alphabet. The style of the alphabet evolved as well from block letter to unicals to the uppercase and lowercase letters we all know and love today. Hi, I'm Jim Kohler, the print and paper guy. So in this episode, which is short, as I just highlight what I think are some of the key times, I tell you how print and the method of the written communication happened. So stick with me, and let's get into it. The beginnings of printing date back hundreds and hundreds of years. The Chinese were able to print by inking covered marble surfaces. They were etched somehow, and then placing some sort of substrate on them. Kind of early offset, I guess. However, they were only able to print designs and symbols. By the 10th century, printing was actually applied to the production of paper currency, which had the effect of introducing the concept of inflation to China. Who knew? Now, moving away from China, the Egyptians were able to print by using ink and brushes. But while they had many colors, they primarily used black, which was printed on papyrus, which was one of the earliest forms that we know of paper. What is interesting for you old typewriter folks out there, while the Egyptians used mostly black, red was used to emphasize text. The Egyptians used papyrus, which was regarded as a superior writing material between 3000 BC and 500 AD. Rolls of papyrus were probably our first books. All sorts of documents were printed on papyrus during that time. By the way, papyrus is made from the papyrus plant, which is a tall reed that originally grew in abundance along the Nile River in Egypt. After the fall of the Roman Empire, society entered a period of almost complete barbarism. Few people could read or even sign their name. Literacy became confined to the monasteries. Hence, the monks became the printers, so to speak. If you can remember that commercial by Xerox years ago, the monks were hand-scribing books, but the main book they scribed was the Bible. It was Charlemagne, the kings of the Franks, that set out to change the state of illiteracy. Because of him, schools were opened everywhere to educate the population, including women. Calligraphers and scribes were employed for copying, writing books for distribution. Things at that time really begin to change society. The invention of pure printing is mistakenly attributed to the Europeans, but the Chinese perfected the art of woodblock printing as many as 6 centuries before its move westward into Europe. It was during the Tang Dynasty. Experiments with printing techniques in Buddhist monasteries led to the printing of the most famous book, the Diamond Sutra, which was in the year 868 AD. So while Gutenberg has credit for movable type, he sure wasn't the first. His claim actually is the creation of metal type, which the Chinese did not have. The Chinese continued with wood blocks and or clay type, which could break easily under pressure of printing. The book, the Diamond Sutra, itself was a roll that measured 16 feet long and about a foot wide. It was comprised of 7 sheets of paper pasted together and included size sheets of text. They were each about 30 inches long. By the way, the sizing they used was glue, wax, and or clay. The Chinese had figured out how to form a paper type for watching wasps build a nest. They could take a fiber, beat it in water, lay out the pulp, and let the sun dry it. Seems pretty easy to me. It took about 1,000 years for paper to finally arrive from China to Europe. Really, paper making took a long period of time to evolve, but when it did, a typical paper maker could make up to about 55 reams of paper in a day. We owe our friends in the UK for all these different crazy basis weights we have to deal with. Thanks, folks. But now this is where print really took off. We now meet the father of mass communication, Johann Gutenberg. Gutenberg was a coin and jewelry minter, so he learned a lot about metallurgy, engraving, and punch cutting. He saw how countless scribes and illuminates produced Bibles, missals, church documents, legal papers, and books, all by hand. So he got the idea of creating and typecasting a mold. If you could make coins or jewelry by casting, why not lines of words? So he did take a loan, however, from Johann Faust and set up shop. He also bought a wine press and modified it so it could be used as a printing press. Now, some of my friends in Wisconsin swear it was a cheese press. I'm going with the wine press. Now, in the year of 1450, it was estimated that there were around 30,000 handwritten books in the world. After Gutenberg created cast movable type, and 50 years later, there were 9 million. The sad fact is eventually Faust calls in as a loan, and at that time, Gutenberg was cash short. But he had printed the Bible, his first publication, so Faust took the Bibles that were completed up to Paris, where he sold them. The Catholic Church recognized that every book was the same. That was unheard of due to the hand drafting of books so both men were brought up on charges of heresy or witchcraft. As a result, Faust made okay, but Gutenberg died a pauper, and Faust took control of the business. If you ever get to Munich, visit das Deutsches Museum, as they have 1 or 2 Gutenberg Bibles on display, and of course encased in argon gas, etc. Gutenberg could print 300 black and white pages a day. He tried 2-color, but it didn't work out for him. After the pages were printed, scribes would add the headed artwork, etc. Now today, we can print thousands of pages per hour, and the techniques of printing vary today from offset, gravure, flexo, and digital. Boy, have the times changed. And the printed word on substrate is not dead. I know this was a very short description on how the evolution of print came about, but I just wanted to highlight some of those key time frames. To do a more justice on this topic would have taken a couple of hours, but the printed word is still important, even in the age of screens. In fact, I recently did an episode on why reading print on paper is much better for you as a human than reading on screens. And with all that, I'm Jim Kohler, the Print and Paper Guy. And if you haven't subscribed, why not? And if you do subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified of all new episodes. So I do hope to see you in the next Print and Paper Guy episode.